And we are recording. All right, Mr. Boobles, kick us off, man.
All right, so this week on the Agile Wire, we've got Rich Sheridan. Rich comes to us from Menlo. He's the author of Joy Inc. He's, I don't know, I would say that you're touted as one of the leading Agile companies out there. When people talk about what does an Agile company look like, in my mind, I think of Menlo Innovations, and so it's great to have Rich on. We're going to talk about how things are changing and this new world that we're in, and with people going more remote and see where the conversation goes. So, Rich, I guess starting off there, I know you were just saying before we started recording, like you're getting lots of questions about, how is Menlo working? Because when Jeff and I toured there, we saw everything was physical on the walls. There was physical tools that people, very tactile things that people use for planning and organizing. People paired, and they were always, really closely working together. Use this high voice technology, or is that the term, high voice?
High-speed voice technology,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, high-speed voice technology to communicate to the whole entire company, right? Where it just, you bring everybody in and let's have a conversation. Um, Obviously, those things have changed with moving to going remote. But what are you doing now? How are you handling things?
Yeah, just because not everybody who's listening can imagine what Menlo was like pre-pandemic. I'll give you just a visual picture. As you described, we might have been one of the more pro-COVID environments that you can imagine. Fortunately, nobody got sick at Menlo from the pandemic, which is good news for all of us. But we are all in a room together. I sit out in the room with everybody else. We work shoulder to shoulder. We work two people to one computer. They're sharing a keyboard and a mouse. We pass around a two-horned plastic Viking helmet at our daily stand-up meeting, so everybody's touching the same object as it goes around. The 50 or 60 people who are on the team, and even our visitors join in. You probably, when you visited, joined our stand-up meeting. Yep. And so, obviously all of those constructs are exactly the opposite of what we should be doing right now. And as of about March 20th, everybody was home, everybody working remotely. And now the question is, how do you effectively continue the cultural norms of Menlo in this 100% remote work environment? And we're using technology, of course. We still pair. All of the work at Menlo is done, two people essentially working on the same task at the same time. When they were in Menlo, they were at the same computer sharing the keyboard and mouse. Now they're both home, and that remote pairing is being facilitated by screen sharing, audio, video, and so on. Fortunately for us, we've been doing remote pairing continuously for the last 7 years, typically with our customers who would form half of the remote pair, whatever city they were in. So we were very adept at the remote pairing stuff. We just never done it at the scale. And the other part that's, weird, but working, is that even when we were remote pairing, one half of the pair was in that room I was describing. So we were all still within earshot and eye shot of one another. We could still use Hey Menlo to call an all company meeting. Our, as you said, our high-speed voice technology worked. And so we're finding other constructs. The good news is, I think when you have a culture that is as adaptable as ours has been over the last 20 years, guess what? We had to really lean on that muscle to get things working the way we needed to. And so we had anticipated this happening. We were watching what was happening in China, what was happening in Italy, and so on. So we knew, there was no way this wasn't going to land on our doorstep. And so in February, we'd done some practicing with this, which is very typical of us, run the experiment type of practicing. Yep. So we took whole project teams and just sent them home and said, guys, for the next couple of days, you're going to work on this project from home. We're going to find out what equipment you didn't take with you, whether your bandwidth at home is as good as it needs to be, and all that sort of thing. So we had done a few sort of trial runs of this bugging out kind of thing. And then when the national emergency was declared on March 13th, we asked the team, basically, this is before the governor of our state had issued a stay-at-home order. we were checking with the team members saying who's comfortable with staying here, who really wants to be home because they feel safer there. And probably within Monday or Tuesday of that first week, March 16th, 17th, 60 to 70% of the team was already home. We were learning how to do our daily stand-up meeting virtually. When it was hybrid, when there was 40% in the office and 60% at home, we would just make a computer one of the stand-up circle team members, but it had a Zoom meeting with everybody on it, and then we stumbled and bumbled and fumbled along with who's next, because you can't really tell like you can when you're standing in a circle. So we've created constructs for helping us through that, and we keep getting better at it. And now we do a virtual stand-up every morning at 10 o'clock. And it's all working, fortunately, but very different than our typical environments all day.
I love how you were talking about the experiment that you ran, where it's like, hey, we know this is coming. Let's all just try working from home. When this was all starting back in February, I had some clients and I kind of suggested they try the same thing. But I was like even more drastic. Let's just send an email out at like 6 a.m., put a note on the door, like doors are locked today. We're practicing for COVID-19 if this hits. And like, this is how it might actually happen. And you can't come to work today. Everybody needs to work from home, and just see what we run into. Because it's better to find that out earlier, like, oh, we need monitors, we need keyboards, we need better internet, whatever the thing is. Well, we can get that stuff now than months down the road when that stuff's all scarce. And one client took me up on it, and they did it, and it proved a lot of things out. And we got a lot more infrastructure in place before we had to go and do this. And so it was a really valuable experiment. We're also talking with some of the clients I'm working with right now of when we go back to work, because they're already starting to plan that for this summer. Like, we need to have maybe a test where it's like randomly, sometime next week, the doors are going to close and everybody has to work back from home again, because we don't know if this is going to spin back up into the future. And we need to keep both, our current location and our at home workspaces working at top performance. So,
well, and we're imagining, as we plan on coming back, whatever that means, whenever that is, we're not going to do it quickly. We're going to be, that'll probably be one of the places where we will not be a first adopter of anything. We're going to stay at home, watch what happens. We're watching very carefully what's going on in Korea and the reopenings in Europe and that sort of thing. And then plan accordingly. But our assumption is for the next couple of years, we will at least be a hybrid in the office work from home model. And like you're saying, there may be moments of second waves, third waves, and fourth waves where we're just like, okay, everybody home again. Let's go through the exercise again. And of course, we've done it once, so it won't be quite as unnerving as it was the first time.
What I was going to chime in with real quick, it sounded like almost like you're running that Chaos Monkey, I think is what it's called. This is software that purposely kind of putzes with your DevOps pipeline and your deployment pipeline. It'll randomly turn things on and off just so that you can test your resiliency and how quick you are at actually fixing those things. And it just makes you, in the DevOps world, it makes your deployments more resilient to, if something breaks, we can quickly adapt, we can quickly get things out there. Where really you're just kind of doing that as an organization, right? We're purposely trying to break things early to test our ability. So when the actual situations arise, we've already kind of tested these ideas out and have a track record of being able to respond. So that's pretty cool.
I like your thinking. I like the thinking that maybe all of this is just a ruse, and it's just a big chaos monkey for the world that says we got to see what would happen if a pandemic happens. Maybe it really hasn't happened. Maybe it's just a test. So, and tomorrow they'll tell us, okay, we were just kidding. You can all go back to work now.
That would be nice. But actually, there's definitely been some nice things about working from home. So it's not kind of a dreary picture. But I was really curious about. I don't want to question stack here. I've got a lot in my head here. But how has this affected specifically your high tech anthropologists? So I would imagine that getting in front of that customer, really understanding them, kind of is a critical piece of that. is being able to go and meet with your customer and understand their environment and actually live a day in their shoes and getting, that full understanding and grasp of them and how they're going to use the product, et cetera. And now all of a sudden you've got to try and accomplish that all virtually. So I'm curious, how has that affected that role in your organization?
Well, and I'm going to just torture your question a little bit more because it's doubly virtual. We're doing that work virtually, and we're doing it with people who themselves are working virtually.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of strange, right? We're doing high-tech anthropology now in people's homes who are themselves on stay-at-home orders where they're working. And so I will simply highlight the spirit and energy of the team at Menlo, which I personally revel in because I need their energy right now. And when we landed a new client in Beaumont, Texas, and even just the sales process had to be virtual, of course. I've never met these folks down there. They had heard about us through another contact and so on. And here we are, and we're all kind of thinking like, how can we land a new deal? How can we do even the proposal creation about how complex is this project? And then what will the project look like? Because as you say, the first phases of our projects are typically with our high-tech anthropologists who are studying the people we're ultimately going to serve with the software we're going to design and build. And Molly, one of our longtime high-tech anthropologists, kind of leans in. She goes, "This will be so exciting to figure out how to do this." and all I'm thinking is, this will never work. We won't be able to do this. And she's like, "Oh no, we'll figure it out." Yeah, like the high-tech anthropology piece of Menlo is one of our most unique calling cards. It goes to the heart of our mission at Menlo, which is to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. And ultimately, the people we want to end the suffering for are the people who one day use the software we're designing and building. And we believe the only way to do that well is to truly understand the people we're serving. And we do that by going out into the world and observing them in their native environment, learning their vocabulary, their workflow, their goals, their habits, learning about the human part of things. That's why we call it anthropology, because anthropology is the study of humans. Mm-hmm. And of course, that is a very in-person, get on airplanes, go there, spend a few days there, bring that information back and that sort of thing. And of course, none of that's going to happen. And even if you could get on an airplane, I'm not sure our team would want to get on an airplane right now.
Sure. Understandable.
Reason airlines are down 95% is even if you can do it, which you can, you don't want to for the obvious reasons. And so I think as I think through that, the most heartening moment for me was when one of our high-tech anthropologists, Molly, said, "Oh, this will be so exciting to figure out how to do this." And I thought, oh my gosh, thank you, Molly. Thank you for that spirit and energy, which says we can figure this out. And they have, and it's working. I think everybody's right now looking at, is this the new normal? Should we just keep going this way? Is there a possibility we've just found the new way of working? I don't sense that from my team at this point. I don't sense anybody saying, "I think this is going so well, we should just work like this forever." I think it's more like, we can adapt, we can make this work, and let's hope we can get back to something closer to what it used to be. Probably not exactly, but this idea of always virtual is not.
But it probably gives you some options, right? Like, because now you're like, hey, we have done the high-end anthropology remote. Like, there's somebody in Asia that wants to do that. Maybe we don't want to fly over to Asia. Like, maybe we're open to trying an experiment now because we've proven some things out that we can do. We can do this in a remote fashion. So it might open up some options.
Yeah, and we just did those kind of visits down to South America just recently for a company that makes heart-lung machines. And we had to see how they worked them down there. And in the past, we would have considered putting people on airplanes and flying down to Buenos Aires and that sort of thing. And this time it was like, nope, they just stayed in their home and did it remotely. And again, it's working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think there will be new pages in the playbook from here on out that say, because quite frankly, I think even I was talking with somebody who's on a nonprofit board, and they're doing, of course, all their board meetings virtually. And I think in the past, if somebody said, "Hey, our meeting's on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock," and you said, could you make it so I could tie in remotely? There's that old, that kind of meme that people, oh, you just want to phone it in. You don't actually want to come. You're not as committed. And now, of course, everybody's doing this, and they find out, so I don't have to leave my house 45 minutes before the meeting, drive in, find a parking place, get to the meeting room, sit down, spend 90 minutes in the meeting, and reverse that 45 minutes the other way. I can do it from home. And quite frankly, I think a lot of those kind of organizations are seeing higher participation rates, maybe more relaxed people who didn't have to rush out after dinner or something for a 7 o'clock meeting. Mm-hmm. And so I think we are, as a society, A, learning things about how to do this, but B, also readjusting our social norms interpretation of, is this appropriate?
Yeah, I was working with a team just this week, and they had people that were partially remote, so they're partially distributed teams before this all hit, and they never had video on. Like, they would use different tools, but they never ever had video on. Once this hit, we started making it just kind of a way that we work. We always put video on. Like, you can't see facial expressions, you can't get the connection that you normally have. It's just there's a different level of communication, right, when you don't have the video on. And now everybody has it on, and they have said that, hey, when we go back to work, we're going to keep video on, even though 70% of us might be in the same room. Everybody will have their video on for the people that are remote. Right. And I think that's only going to help those people be better team members, because they're going to have better connections with everybody else on the team going forward. So if anything, it's changed that team, or some of those teams that learn these new norms of how to be a better distributed team member.
Well, and you probably saw at least one Menlo dog when you were in visiting. I don't know if there were dogs in the office that day. Unbeknownst to us, until all of this hit, there are actually cats of Menlo too. They never came into the office, but boy, they love coming into the video meetings. And suddenly you see this cat crawling across somebody's shoulders, and then you're like, "Oh, what's your cat's name?" and that sort of thing. And I think, I think there is actually, as you said, there are good things coming out of this, no question. We're seeing people's lives. We're seeing their family, their children. I think the hardest part for our younger team members who have young families is, how do they balance? Because the childcare is closed, the schools are closed, the kids are home, the kids are hungry, they're crying in the background because their siblings are fighting or something like that. But it's real. Right? I mean, it's that recognition that, we are people. We are people inside of our own communities at home and our families and that sort of thing. There's real things going on in our lives. And so I think it has humanized our team just a little bit more. And I think we were pretty humanized to begin with.
Yeah.
It's interesting you bring that up. I was just teaching a class probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. It was a Scrum Master class, and had 2 gentlemen in there, and one of them had a 4-month-old and one had a 6-month-old. And I use this example whenever now. So before I teach a class, I always do a pre-check, just making sure that from a technology standpoint, we can see each other, we can hear each other, no big latency issues, no big background noise issues. And I always end the call talking, and I say, I just want to touch on professionalism for just a minute. And when I was talking about professionalism, I'm not talking Zoom bombing. I'm not worried about that in any of the courses. I'm just, what I articulate is, most of the people are on shelter-in-place orders, and some people's shelter-in-place is a little bit more ideal than other people's shelter-in-place. And I talk about these 2 gentlemen, and those kiddos made some guest appearances over the course of those 2 days of training, right? And of course, they were respectful. They muted the microphone when the kiddos were around, but one of the guys was doing overhead presses with the kid by the legs. And I think that highlights, the male versus female role of raising kids and what they care to do with them. But nonetheless, as long as you don't detract from the training, I don't care. And just take a moment to extend the same courtesy to the other students that you would like extended to you if your home life situation wasn't as ideal as you would like it to be. And I like ending with that, because it's just a reminder to, be courteous to one another, to be respectful to one another. We talk about the values in Scrum and whatnot, but it is just an excellent opportunity to live that. And I think even when or especially in a switch situation like yours, where that culture has already come up and we're always working with one another. We've got to be respectful of that other individual. I think you even articulated as those kindergarten skills, right? Like learning to share with one another, learning to be kind with one another. I feel like that's only from an outsider's perspective, but that's something that your culture just has to kind of embrace. Otherwise, you'd kind of weed those people out naturally. They just wouldn't do well in that type of environment. And I think that translates really well to a distributed environment where you got to keep that in mind even more so probably than when you were in person with other people.
Yeah, and we're looking at all the different kinds of constructs we need to add now because we've lost that intimacy of being in the room together and the casual conversations that occur because we're all together every day. And just yesterday, we began a new series at Menlo of Thursday lunches with Rich and James. And James is my co-founder. Because the team, I mean, quite frankly, what I appreciate about them is they want to know how we're doing through all of this. They know this is hard for us. They see what we're working to do to keep them together, to keep them fed. The work we did to get our PPP loan and the work we're doing to watch our financials and land new deals and all that sort of thing. And so, in many ways, yesterday there was nothing planned to it in terms of an agenda or anything like that. We just all got together like we do. It's not unusual for us to all be in a group gathering together. And the conversation just flowed. It flowed like it normally would. And the team asked James and I some very sort of deeply personal questions about how are we personally dealing with this. And afterwards, the heartfelt emails I got from team members who said how much they appreciated both that we were willing to share and quite frankly, that they could see they could imagine it, but hearing it firsthand, how we're personally adjusting to this is just really gratifying from a team perspective. And I think those kind of constructs have to be added in, because you lose something. You lose something when you're all together. So now the question is, what's the best thing we can replace it with? And so for the time being, for the next several weeks at least, we are going to just every Thursday, everybody who wants to come can come. And I think we had nearly 100% attendance yesterday. They can just check in with us, ask the questions they really want to ask. We'll share, as and probably on the tour, we're willing to share pretty much everything with the world. We're certainly willing to share it with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done some of that stuff with clients, and we've found you get a big room and it's great. Like if you want to convey a message, but then you have one audio channel where if you were in a big group, you might go off and have a little side conversation here, but with one audio channel being remote, that doesn't work so well. So we started using breakout rooms in Zoom and break people into smaller rooms and then break them back, and kind of like a speed dating, almost like, let's spend 5 minutes and we're just gonna put you in a room to talk to somebody. Like if you want to be a part of this, and then we're gonna bring you back and put you in a different random room with a different person and let you talk to that person. And it just keeps the connections going in the organization. Another tool that I've used is there's a coffee tool, a randomized coffee tool that's for Slack. And it's like a plugin that you edit, and anybody who wants to join this channel, it just randomizes who you're going to have coffee with that week. And it just says, you're going to have coffee with this person now this week and this person this week. And so it just, keeps those connections going. And, maybe you wouldn't have a conversation with Molly every week or maybe for months because she's working on something else. But now, it gives you that space to do that. So I think it's really important to create that space during this too. However you do it, it needs to happen, right?
Yeah, and we've won a few deals in the last several weeks, which is just yay! You can still win deals in this crazy environment. And the first one that came in, we just started texting each other pictures of wine glasses and beer bottles, and we were just toasting each other via text. And the other construct we've created is there's often been times where a handful of us would go out to Tio's, a local Mexican place, for margaritas after work on a Friday. We're continuing that. We just don't go out. We just stay home. We get the margarita mix from Costco, and Some don't like margaritas, so they bring whatever the heck they're going to bring. And it was funny. My co-founder and I, one of the things we love to do is golf, and we're running a golf league together. We're not very good at it, but we enjoy the getting outside. And boy, we are golfing more now than we ever golfed at this point of the season. But that Friday margarita thing interfered with James and my golf, so we went golfing, and as a few others gathered. And we got 18 holes in. We came back home to our respective homes. And my wife is part of this group because she works at Menlo. And it was like 8:30 at night, and they're still together. They're still talking. Guys, you're still doing this? We played 18 holes of golf while you started this thing. And they went for another hour. So, and I think those kind of outlets are just really, really good. Because I think, work is work still for everybody. It's hard. There's pressure. There's the pressure to perform, the pressure to not fail, the pressure to hit a deadline or get stuff done. And you need those kind of relief valves. And I think we need to be careful as leaders to consider that we've lost some of those natural relief valves, because getting together after work in a kind of let your hair down situation and just talk about stuff is kind of gone, right? You're home all the time. And in fact, I think that I remember this. I'm going to show you something here, guys. Forgive the little twist of the monitor here for a second, but I'm going to show you where I am, because it's kind of historically significant. Okay, this is my basement. Okay. Now you got to admit, I've done a pretty good job of turning this into a little video studio, right?
Yeah.
But that space you just looked at. Oh, I gotta get back to my don't chop my head off place. That room you just saw was the original location of Menlo. We started in my basement. Okay, we were here about 4 months until my wife finally got tired of us and kicked us out of the house. My neighbors were starting to get concerned about the number of cars that were showing up every week. And I discovered way back then, when I was working from home, right? Because I'd get up in the morning and I'd come downstairs and I was at work. And I found out, man, this isn't working for me. I need this sort of physical break. I think there's an advantage to getting in a car, driving to an office, and doing the reverse on the way home, because you kind of compartmentalize work then as you're moving.
Yeah.
And so what I used to do then, and I do a little bit of this now, as much as you can in this kind of environment, is I would get up in the morning, get showered, get dressed, and then I'd get on my bike and I'd ride downtown. I'd go to a coffee shop and have a cup of coffee, and then get on my bike and ride back home. And so it had the dual effect of giving me a little bit of exercise, but it also felt in some ways like I was going to work. Mm-hmm. And I think we need those kind of constructs when home is your workplace, and you need some way to like separate in your mind that I'm not at work right now.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can't turn off your work brain, and that can be very mentally debilitating, I think.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people that just keep working like late into the night, because it's like, I'm at home, I just had supper and I'll go back to work. And it's like, no, like spend time with your family. Like just because you're in the same spot as where you work doesn't mean you have to go back to work because there's stuff to do. Like, oh wait,
Yeah, our pairing construct has always helped with that, because if your pair partner isn't there, then you're done working. So you'd have to literally collude with someone to work extra hours, and we don't reward that. People we pay hourly, so people get paid more if they work more hours. But there's nothing in our culture that says working more gets you greater attaboy awards, or there's no construct at Menlo for that. So we've always been very much a 40-hour work week kind of company. Obviously, you got to break that every now and then when you're doing traveling or the remote stuff. But I think there is definitely ability for people to just shut down, go start baking bread or whatever they're doing at home now. So,
yeah, my wife has been well, I shouldn't just throw the bone over to her. We've both been kind of struggling with that separation since my office is also my play area. So I play a lot of video games and it's generally in
Mm-hmm.
front of the computer, and that happens to be where I'm also doing a lot of work. And so it's I think it's easier when you're, like you were talking about, when you're in a separate space, right? Like, this is my work area and this is where I go. And now my mindset is I'm going to be doing work. Over here is my play area and my mindset is I'm going to be doing play. But now those two are the same. So it's a little bit harder to separate what I'm doing and when I'm doing it, and really just kind of turning it off. Obviously, I'm not playing video games when I'm training a class, but there's tends to be more bleed over afterwards where, oh, let me go ahead and update this information over here, and hard to separate it. So I know I've personally been struggling with that for the past 6 weeks. In fact, I was talking with Jeff about this earlier, where um, typically with the job, I travel quite a bit. So I listen to probably almost 3 hours of podcasts a day. Now they're at 1.5x, so it's really only like an hour and a half to 2 hours of listening. But I still typically listen to 2 books a month on Audible, and I haven't finished reading or listening to Sense and Respond, which was the last book that I was listening to.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe a 7 hour listen on Audible, and that's nothing compared with what I normally listen to.
Right.
And I haven't finished that in 6 weeks now, and so I still haven't gotten into the right habit of what I should be doing and when I should be doing it at home. And I'm the type, when I open up my my feed of all the podcasts that I need to listen to, and I see there's like 15 of them there, I'm just inundated. Like I just shut it down because I'm just starting to delete
Right.
things
You
out
can
of there.
feel it on your shoulders, right?
Yeah,
Like, oh,
exactly.
no.
So that scheduling, that regiment isn't something that I've yet effectively built for myself. And in fact, again, I was literally just talking with Jeff about this before we started recording. But that's one of my big goals now for this weekend, is to try and mentally reset. I've done a good job of, in the morning, I get up, I do my stretches, just because I can't go to the gym anymore. But I've got to start being a little bit more practical and regimented about how I approach things to get myself back into that state. And I mean, tools are good, but I think there's a little bit of self-ownership to this. A person needs to step up and kind of take accountability for this to fix themselves, and then be able to transition into work and then play and whatnot. So.
Yep. No, I agree. And I think, it feels like forever already that we've been doing this, right? It feels like, holy cow, this has been going on for years. But it's only been 10 weeks for most of us. And I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of space to say, we do still have to work on this. We do still have to figure this out. This isn't something that we knew how to do. And, and I think even just becoming sort of hyper self-aware, right? Like you're feeling right now. It's like, boy, I know I need a structure to my day different than what I've been doing, because it doesn't feel healthy. I'm not working out as much. I'm not getting everything in I used to do. And so I think, I know for my wife and I, boy, we have seen more neighborhoods in our 2 to 3 mile range of our house than we have in the 40 years we've lived here, because we're spending a lot of time on walks. I have 3 daughters, but 2 of them live really close by. Just meeting them socially distanced at the park with their dogs and going for walks in the park with them has been really healthy. So I think, I think each of us is keeping a mindful eye for where can we unplug. I have a personal fitness instructor that has continued to work with me just by video now, by Skype. And when I worked out with him on Wednesday, we did no workout. We just talked.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him what I was going through, that I was having trouble sleeping, that I was feeling some aches and pains that felt like more than I would have expected. And he started telling me about how the stress in your body how's the stress in your mind manifests itself in your body. And he gave me some great advice. He said, right after this, go take a bath. I said, what? He says, a bath, Epsom salt bath. And I'm like, I haven't taken a bath for probably 20 years, And so I did what he told me. And it was great. and it really, boy, it really helped. I didn't take any electronics. I took some music, and that was it. I wasn't like trying to catch up on email because I think, that's the other temptation, right? Oh, I can check email while I'm doing this other thing that doesn't require anything else. But it was a really pleasant experience, and I think it really did help not only my mindset but my body. And I think we've got to be watching for all of that stuff. I think taking care of ourselves individually is just as important as taking care of our team.
Yeah, agree. And that's one of the things I've always loved about Menlo is like the human connection, the human side. Like you guys don't like separate that. It's just all one person. And I guess I just love how you always talk about that. And just at this time, I bet you like everybody in your organization just feels like one team, and where this could be something that could divide a team or divide an organization. And so I think that's one of the really great things.
Thank you. I agree. I'm not sure I even was, I could fully anticipate how much the cultural stuff we've worked on for the last 19 years was going to be this just incredibly solid foundation for what we're going through now. One of our team members, Ben, just today was his last day. He and his wife decided they're going to move back to Boston. And at least for now, they've decided to seek jobs in that area rather than him continuing to work for us remotely. And it was the most touching stand-up today. It took 15 minutes longer than usual because everybody created a Zoom background that was some kind of clever goodbye image to Ben and that sort of thing. And everybody talked about how he had touched their lives. And it was very touching. And, I look at that and I think, it's probably one of those moments where I think this is what I love about what we've created myself, how satisfying it is to see this personal outpouring from every member of the team to talk about Ben and how they related to him. And of course, Ben is also the proud dad of Menlo baby number 25. So little James came to stand up with him and sat there, and we were all celebrating little James's first tooth, the one right down here, this one right here. So we even know which tooth it was. So a lot of neat things, and it's why I think we're all willing to keep working as hard as we can to get back to some version of Menlo that we just feel as much joy as we did when we were all in the office together.
Mm-hmm. When we came for the tour a couple of years ago, it was somebody else's last day, and we did that group stand up and we passed the Viking helmet around. It got to that person who was leaving, and there were some tears shed, not just from her, but from other people on the team. And I just remember thinking like, wow, what love like in this organization do people have, where like everybody is like, I don't know, you can just feel the emotional connection. Even at that point, like it was my first time sitting there and meeting all these people. The first, 20 minutes we've been there, and I'm like, I just want to like hug everyone because like you just feel like like you're just in a big family.
2 years ago, that would have been okay. Now we'd be like, get away from me. 6 feet, buddy. Yeah. Virtual hug.
And if I recall correctly, it was either like somebody told a story or it was that person's turn right before us to go in order. So I was oh, geez, how do we follow that one up, right?
Yeah, as you're dabbing the tears off your face.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even know this person and I love them. Yeah.
So we were talking with David Dame not too long ago, and so he's one of the leaders at, I think it's Scotiabank up in Canada somewhere. I'm not too familiar with Canada; it's just north of here. But nonetheless, he was talking a lot about how this has changed not just the organizations, but also how leaders lead in their organizations. And he was talking specifically about being more deliberate and having more scheduled time to be meeting with people, making sure that they knew that he was available for anything. And I think you've kind of hit on some of that with, the happy hour or the Thursdays, the Thursday meetings. But I was kind of curious, put aside the financials perspective, and obviously there are things that you're worrying about as the leader of your organization. But I'm curious, what are some other things that you're trying to focus on to be that leader for your team members, not necessarily your company during this time?
Yeah, well, I think you guys know because you saw it. We have been very much a non-hero based organization. It's a team. People aren't lifted up individually, and these are the heroes. And I think it is so tempting for me because I grew up in a hero-based environment. I became the hero. I was one of the top leaders. I probably drowned out people's voices at meetings so I could be seen as this top leader. And I have to admit that right now I feel like I'm being put back in that role personally, right? As a CEO of a company is struggling. Will we have enough business to hang on to everybody on the team? How will we adjust the culture? And, and quite frankly, I mean, there's even a part of me that wonders, like, could Menlo help with technology that could help solve COVID-19? I mean, I could be a hero to the world and that sort of thing. And of course, what that causes me to do personally is just like think as hard as I can, like pour water out of my brain onto this rock in front of me, and hopefully it'll just crumble in front of me. And I have to be very careful because I can't solve these problems by myself. And so that was one of the things I talked about with the team yesterday. I said, look, I'm really struggling with this. I don't like it. I want to get back to the way we were, and I know I can't. So I'm thinking this thing to death. I said, that's one of my principles of, I will wear this problem down with my thought process. But I said, my second construct, and this is the important one I think that you're bringing up, is I can't do it alone. I need you. I need you, the team around me, to give me ideas to collaborate with me, because that's the kind of environment we've created. And that's where I tend to shine, is when I'm reaching out to others and working with them on things. It's actually why I appreciate having these kind of conversations with guys like you, because you're bringing in fresh ideas, fresh perspectives from the other people you've talked to. And I hope I'm doing the same for people who follow me. I think this, the leadership component of this is, it's not all on me. It can't be. Even when we knew this tsunami was coming, I went to the team. We brought them together on March 16th after the national emergency was declared. And we told the team straight up, we said, we don't know what's coming. It's big. We don't know how big. We don't know how long. There's so much uncertainty. And we looked at them and said, Menlo can't solve this for you on its own. There are going to have to be some huge government interventions right now, because we had watched like every restaurant in Ann Arbor closed the week before. Unemployment, we knew, was skyrocketing, even if the numbers hadn't been showing it at the time. And we said, there's no way that doesn't land on our doorstep. And we said, guys, we just got to let you know, we're not going to solve this on our own. So we started cutting pay, we started cutting hours, and we said, we don't know what's coming, but it's got to be big, and it's got to come from the government. And that was long before CARES Act was being talked about, and PPP loans and all that kind of stuff. And of course, it happened the way we imagined it. I mean, sort of. I couldn't imagine the specifics, but we knew there had to be government interventions. And quite frankly, when the PPP 8-week loan period runs out, we said to them again, we said, we don't, we're not going to be in dire circumstances the week after or even the month after. But if this keeps going the way it's going, 2 or 3 months after, we got to start making some really hard decisions, because I don't know how long the government can keep writing $2 trillion checks, like we tip the, tip the waitress at the restaurant or something. I mean, it's just like, it doesn't seem like the whole system is going to be able to keep repairing itself with the constructs we've used to date. And hopefully, obviously, we all want to get back to some semblance of working, and we got to figure it out together.
How did you make those decisions about like cutting pay, changing structure, things like that? Was that you making those decisions, or the teams together, or how did you facilitate that?
Yeah, I think it is, as much as we are this highly collaborative, non-hierarchical organization, there are moments where command and control is going to be of paramount importance. For example, if there was a fire in the building, if I stood up and said, get out now, get out right now, I would say it in a way that everybody'd be like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting out of the building. We'll figure it out when we're on the sidewalk, right? And so there were a handful of us that James and I picked, got together, shared our perspective of what we saw going on. We said, we got to make big decisions, and we got to make them now, and they're going to be hard. And, and we didn't want to export our hard decisions to the entire rest of the team. And what we recognized, just to give you a little sense of our thinking there, was we knew that there were two primary constructs that were going to allow us to survive. Number one, take care of health and safety of the team. Number two, preserve the business. And so on the first front, it was get people out of the building as quickly as possible. Let's bug out. And it wasn't going to be tomorrow. It wasn't going to be the Post-it note on the door like you were describing, but it was like, we're going home. Start taking equipment, take what you need, that sort of thing. The second piece on preserve the business was take care of the clients we have, dedicate some staff to prudent marketing and sales efforts, and obviously business operations to make sure, bills are still getting paid and payroll is still running and that sort of thing. But we said for the time being, we're going to have to take financial measures to preserve cash, because cash is, we have no outside investors, and Menlo lives off of what it produces. And so we talked about what are some of the different constructs, and what we realized was the psyche of our team is that if we said, hey, you guys are getting laid off and everybody else is going to stay the same, there would be this inordinate amount of survivor's guilt in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because people would be like, well, why me? I mean, I'll take their place. Send me in their place. I'll be okay, and that sort of thing. And we were making decisions on who should stay and who should go based on who we thought would take the best care of the few clients that were keeping things going, because that would, again, be in the spirit of preserve the business. And so we said, no, we got to cut everybody's pay right down to the lowest level. You probably saw our roles and levels board when they're there, and everybody went right down to the lower left-hand corner of associate one pay, which was a dramatic drop. It meant that top leaders on the team were taking the biggest hit, and the people who were closer to that were taking the smallest hit. But we knew that would be right in the minds of everybody at Menlo. It's like, okay, we're in this together, right? The founders went to zero. So the team, I had team members come up and say, wow, we really appreciate what that means to all of us, that you guys were willing to cut your pay to zero in this time. And so, we sent out, I think we made those decisions in the morning. We delivered the news that afternoon. So there was no languishing about, is this the right thing to do? And we looked at them, we said, we don't know what's coming, but here's what we're going to do, and we're going to do it right now. And so, I think, there are times where even in a non-hierarchical model, there is a time where the top people have to step in, like James and I, and say, this is what we're doing. And I think that was a great relief to the team, because at least there was that kind of certainty in terms of, okay, now we know what's going on. We know how to prepare and that sort of thing. And yeah.
So I was going to ask, how did you come up with those two kind of guiding light, or those two goals that you were going after?
Yeah, it was pretty quick in the beginning of that meeting. It's like, what are our, highest priorities as we're making these decisions? And we knew health and safety, given everything the world was going through, was of paramount importance. I mean, the last thing on earth that James and I wanted was that we were going to, we're going to tough it out to the last minute and bring everybody together. It's like we were looking at our team like, this is the opposite of what the world is demanding right now. So let's be safe. Let's keep everybody healthy. Because goodness knows, I mean, we know people who, their family lives, their kids, all that kind of stuff. And then the second piece was, if we don't preserve the business, none of the other stuff matters, right? And then the question was, beyond the billable work we have, what other things should we take care of? And we said, look, we can't stop sales, we can't stop marketing, and we can't stop business operations. We can just focus them in on the minimum we need to keep the business going forward. And those were kind of the four main principles of It just safety, preserve the business, which meant cash. Third was prudent sales and marketing efforts, and then the fourth was prudent business operations. And those popped out pretty quickly, just from that discussion. And then the rest of the discussion that morning was just, so how exactly are we going to do this? And we went through a few iterations of the possibilities, and we settled on this. And we just, and I think the team probably most appreciated that we just didn't languish on this stuff. That we came, we told them, we had a big discussion. One of the guys in the team says, given what you're doing, I'm not going to survive 2 weeks, in my current financial condition. And, and Menlo's the kind of place where in a public setting, one of our team members was willing to be that vulnerable with everybody else. And as he started to figure things out, like going to Ford and saying, hey, can you delay my car payment for a few months? And they would. No relief coming from their landlord where they had an apartment there. But as they started to learn of things they could do for themselves, they started sharing that with their number two members who might be in not quite as dire or a situation as he was. But, the spirit of, I'm going to share what I'm learning with others, because this is what I'm doing to survive.
I find this really interesting. Oftentimes when we talk to organizations and we talk about Menlo having financial transparency, salary transparency, they're like, that would never work. Like we're giving the controls to everybody else that does the work. No way. But I think this story really illustrates that, like, you still have it, but you still have the control to make a decision as the leader, you and James do. But you're giving visibility and transparency into it, so everybody can have shared ownership of where you're going. And you don't have to like tippy-toe around like why you're making it. Like, you have to make hard decisions. And I think probably everybody saw what, the writing on the wall, and you could show them the financials and be like, this is what's happening. And we're looking, here's what's important to us is, maintaining the business and keeping everybody safe and healthy. And here's our best approach that we think to handle this. Let us know if you have other ideas, and I think that's, I don't know. It's a good, it's a great story to maybe give people some relief on the, salary transparency, the financial transparency, myths that are out there.
Yeah, I have to admit, while I would never want something like this to happen, obviously, none of us would, we are now recognizing how powerful all those things you guys saw on the tour where you thought, oh, that's really interesting. That's really clever. That's compelling. I'm fascinated that they do it like that. And we proudly share those things that we do, and we tell you theoretically, at least, why we do them. Man, theory hit the road right in this moment, and I'm like, oh my gosh! Well, you could never pick pandemic as the thing that's going to put everything to the test. I'm just so thankful we have all this stuff in place already, because, as you're saying, now when we go out and share, it isn't like this shockwave of, oh, I had no idea that's how the business ran, or how much money we needed to run payroll, or how much rent was every month. Like, the team totally understands. And I won't say that the understanding is 100% throughout the team. The data is there for all of them to understand. And I think even now, they recognize more why we were doing these things in the past, because now they can help us think about the business as we go forward. It's kind of funny. We had a conversation with one of our big clients, big corporation clients, about what we went through. And I think we told them kind of like that day, we said, yeah, this morning we made these decisions, and this afternoon we're sharing them with the team. And they look at it, you're sharing this information with the team? Like, well, yeah. And they're like, oh, wow, that would be really hard for us. And, and this goes back to a basic managerial edict I've had in my head for decades now, because of the way we run Menlo. If you don't share stuff with your team, they make stuff up in its absence. Mm-hmm. I've never seen humans make up a better story than reality. They always make up a worse story, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, the world's ending and we're going to go out of business tomorrow. Like, no, we're not, actually. I mean, we were literally talking yesterday in our Thursday with lunch and Rich and James, that, we told them exactly how much money we had in the bank in cash. We told them exactly how much receivables we had. We told them which receivables we think are going to be collectible in this amount of time. We told them what's in the pipeline. We talked about how big those projects were and everything, because, the reality is they understand how this all works. They understand what payroll cycles look like. They understand what rent cycles look like. They understand how much our health insurance costs and all that sort of thing. And, and again, we don't like to lead with fear, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But there are things we should be afraid of. Going out of business is one of them. Having somebody get sick is another one. I mean, those are real things we should be afraid of.
Right. I think the thing that I'm hearing here is it's some people might say it's culture. I would say it's more mindset that you have as an organization of we're problem solving people. We're going to have rapid feedback loops and we're going to learn and we're going to take a team approach to everything. I think a lot of times what I heard from some people on the tour, like when we go through it, they might think, oh, I want to steal this practice or this practice.
Mm-hmm.
The practices themselves don't matter that much. It's the mindset behind them and what you're trying to accomplish, and then figuring out a way to do that. The how isn't as important as the why. And I think that's why Menlo will recover from this, is because your why is so strong. Providing joy to the world. So I'm thank you for sharing so much with us. But I really, really believe like companies that have the mindset about solving problems, putting people first, they're gonna find a way through this. They really are.
Yeah, and I know for me personally, I'm desperately personally trying to hang on to everything that is Menlo. I want it to go back to exactly the way it was 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago. And I know that isn't going to happen in the next 8 weeks unless there's some miracle drug that suddenly pops onto the horizon and like, oh, tomorrow everybody takes this drug and everybody's fine, right? That maybe that could happen. That would be neat for all of us, of course. But I have to recognize that there's going to be pieces of Menlo that maybe change forever, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know even exactly what they are yet. I don't know what the implications are for our physical space, for the way we work. I know that there are certain principles of how we work that will never change. The mm-hmm. transparency, the openness, the collaboration, the teamwork, the trust, the belief that each individual person has something unique to bring to the table. We have so many constructs, as you say, so many practices that feed into those basic principles. And it's the practices that are going to change. It's not the principles that are going to change.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I have another question for you. So oftentimes when I'm talking to people about Menlo, and they're like, wow, that sounds like pretty amazing. How big is this company, Menlo? And I tell them, well, they're just under, 100 people. And they're like, oh, well, of course that would work. Like, it's 100-person company. It will never work right. in my large organization.
Sure. Yep.
What would you say to somebody who says something like that?
Yeah, well, we have seen, number one, there was a company we trained in our methods, our practices, probably 15 years ago now, Nationwide Financial down in Columbus, Ohio. And it was one of these things where one of their VPs had to run 400 of their people through a set of training. They needed to get the checkbox of Agile training. And we ran 400 of their people through our training classes as quick as we could. It was kind of fun but insane at the same time. 25 people a shot within about a 1 month period. And quite frankly, we thought at that point it was a typical corporate checklist item, and changing, as you're sort of suggesting in your question, changing a large organization is really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And as the years went by, we hadn't gotten back down to Nationwide to see what was going on, but we kept hearing these stories. There's something. Have you heard what's going on down in Nationwide? And I'm going to be very clear here. What happened down there, we will take some small piece of credit for, but as they say, success has many parents and failure is an orphan. Mm-hmm. We are one of the many hundreds of parents of Nationwide success. But a few years later, maybe 4 or 5 years later, I was down at giving a keynote down in Florida with Tom Pater, who I didn't know at all. I didn't meet him during his time there. But I was up first. I gave my talk, and then Tom comes up, and he puts up his first opening slide, and it says, Tom Pater, IT director at Nationwide Financial. And I'm like, oh, well, this is going to be an interesting story to hear. I can't wait to hear this because I haven't been back there. I don't know what's happened. And Tom got up there and he said, hey, listen, I want to just say something about the first speaker as it relates to what I'm going to show you today. He said, we wouldn't be where we are today without Menlo's influence. So what I'm going to share with you today began with them. And again, Tom would say it too. Yes, we had an influence. Were we 100%? Absolutely not. Like everybody else, Tom himself, a fascinating leader, grabbed onto Agile, grabbed onto Lean, put them together in a really powerful way. But we went, after that, I said, Tom, I got to come see it. Can I come back? And we did. And it was amazing what they had done. I mean, you were seeing a version of Menlo on whole floors of hundreds of people, several floors in a big building in downtown Columbus. And so my statement to people who say, I don't think this could work in a large organization, I can see why it works for little Menlo. I say, yep, it works for us at 50-ish people, and it works for nationwide at 10,000. So it either works at 50 or 10,000. I'm not sure it works anywhere else. And of course, then they look at me like, what? How can that be? So the fact of the matter is, if we were 1,000 people, Menlo would be different. Mm-hmm. Does that invalidate what we've accomplished at 50? Of course not. It just says at every size you're at, you've got unique problems to solve. Go solve them. Go figure out how to do it. But what I encourage people to do is don't do it with bureaucracy. Don't do it with soul-crushing procedures, and don't do it with fear. Do it with purpose. Do it with practices that lift the human energy of our team and decrease the meeting load, that reduce the fear that's operating in your organization. And if you do that, those principle-based movements, I think too often people are, when they come on a tour or they take classes from somebody like you or you get coached by you, they're looking for that. Just tell me the one thing to do that it makes everything better. It's like,
yep. They just want the playbook.
You're kidding,
break out the playbook,
right? Look, I just take a page out of any of our books who have families. That'd be like saying, tell me the one true way to raise a child. Right. Like, well, first, tell me about your child. Well, no, I mean, the general principles of parenting should be universal, shouldn't they? Well, yeah, there should be. There should be love. There should be, caring. There should be encouragement and that sort of thing. But tell me about your kid first, right? Because, do they like to play sports or do they like to read? Do they, that sort of thing. And so I think, organizational design and development is the same thing. We often ask people when they come in and say, so tell us what we should be doing. Tell us what the key practices are. Mm-hmm. And we turn around and say, so what problems are you having? What do you mean? Like, what problem are you trying to solve? Well, we need to be agile. No, agile, first of all, agile is a concept, not a thing. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but we want the practices. Well, why? Well, because we want to be able to say we're agile now. It's like, yeah, but what problem are you trying to solve? And it really flummoxes a lot of people. They get frustrated with us. They're like, just tell us what the practices are. I'm like, okay, we can show you what we do. Like we have a very unique interviewing practice that maybe you heard about. Mm-hmm. It's a group interview. We pair people during the interview with another candidate. We have them work 20 minutes together, and then we switch the pairs so that they get 3 pairings before they go home, and then we decide on who comes. And people are like, oh, we should copy that. And like, well, maybe, but do you understand the interview you just heard described simulates the work environment you just toured through. So if you pair people during your interview, but don't pair them when you work, they'll be like, well, what did the interview have to do with joining here? At Menlo, it's just so incredibly consistent. Like, no, you're experiencing what it's like to work here. We're experiencing you working in an environment like ours. And so if you don't align your HR practices with the culture you're trying to create and the practices you use, you're screwed, right? And so, I think you clearly you got me on a soapbox here, and I don't even remember what the question was anymore. Oh, I know, it was about
large organizations. Yeah. How do you think?
And the fact of the matter is, I mean, I've seen Mass Mutual Corporation, 180-year-old life insurance company that I write about. They let me write their story in the second book. Chief Joy Officer, about the transformation they made after hearing just a talk from me, and the transformation they made within 6 months inside of a 180-year-old, $30 billion a year life insurance company, or General Electric Corporation in Schenectady that made massive changes based on just a couple of talks. I got to start charging more for these talks, clearly. But the fact matter is, and let's face it, I don't care what size your organization is, it is always composed of small units of 50 or 60 people. And I think too often as humans, we get stuck where we're like, well, if it doesn't change the whole organization overnight, then I'm not sure it's worth me changing my 50-unit team and how they practice. Like, no, actually, it's really worth to change your team because your life will get better.
Right.
And you can start to be an example for the rest of your corporation in many ways, like Menlo is for the rest of the world who comes and visits us. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't think anybody, and we tell people this when they come, I don't know if they said this to you, we tell them right up front when they come on a tour, understand our expectation isn't that we're going to tell you that we have found the one true way to organize human beings and that you should copy it and take it home with you. Yep. What we think is valuable about a visit to Menlo is come see a living, breathing, working experiment in organizational design and start to get inspired, take away ideas that you might have, but you're going to have to translate them back into your own organization.
Right. Yeah, it's the concepts, it's the principles that you were talking about that are so important. And it's like, it's really easy to teach somebody how to do something, but teaching them how to think differently or how to apply different principles, that's really difficult when your pressures of the world come in and teams and all that other stuff, right? And yep. I think what I love about Menlo, and I love what you were just talking about, even like the hiring process, like simulate what do you want to simulate here? What are you trying to accomplish? And going into it with the why and the start, and then figuring out what practice you're going to apply there is so different for every organization. And so being free to experiment, which you do so much at Menlo, I think is so amazing. Because if you just go back like to where this all started, like we go back to the Agile Manifesto, the very first sentence that everybody always forgets about, it says, we are learning how to develop software by something along those lines, like but better by doing it. And it's like, it's about the journey, it's not about like the destination, and you're going to get there through doing it. And that's one of the things that I think is great at Menlo, and I think that's the lesson to learn from anyone that's trying to steal something from Menlo, is like, how do we learn from the journey, and how do we get on this journey?
Yeah. Right. And this is actually why I was so interested in that meeting that you just talked about earlier, was you gravitated towards the goal first. And I think most people are gravitating towards the practices or the tactics without understanding the strategy of why are they doing this? What is the outcome of it that we're trying to achieve? You started with the outcome, preserve the business and keep people safe. That's our objective that we're trying to move towards. Mm-hmm. Now let's talk tactics. Yep. But so often when and especially for training, right? I get training is part of a change transition, right? Because you need to build the knowledge to build ability to get them there. Yep. But understand the goal isn't Scrum. The goal isn't more Scrum teams. The goal isn't pairing. It's X. What is X in your organization? Then we can start to have a conversation about different ways of getting us there. And what I heard was part of Menlo's culture is to start with this discovering X, figuring out what is X, why is X so important. Then we can start to have the conversation around the tactics and how we can move towards that.
Yep. Yeah, I think probably you guys have heard, like everybody else, the Scrum but methodologies.
Yep.
I prefer the Scrum and methodologies, right? Mm-hmm. Because there is no set of practices, there's no framework out there that solves all of the challenges that a human organization has. And so we should, as leaders, we should be borrowing from everything and figuring out how to uniquely knit them together to make a cohesive system that involves finance, involves HR, involves, in our case, software design and development, and quality assurance and delivery. But, it also portends IT and facilities and all the things that revolve around making marketing, sales, all the things that make working a business. I'm not if I took a Scrum class and got all the certifications, it wouldn't teach me about any of those things. Does that make Scrum incomplete and unimportant? Of course not. Right? It just has those practices actually have some good mental frameworks in them. But for me, the principles of any kind of methodology, in particular Scrum, fall into general principles of systems thinking, short communication and feedback loops, the ability to adapt a plan as you go forward based on what you're learning along the way. Those are the most important principles behind this. It's funny how many companies we run into who the first time they come visit, they're looking at us and they're like, not sure, is this Scrum? Is this extreme programming? Is this Agile? Is this Lean? Is this design thinking? Is this like, which one is it? Well, kind of all of them and little pieces and parts of all of them. And I could, early on, I loved my co-founder, James, because he's so contrarian. People would say, wow, I see you don't apply the principles of the Project Management Institute to what you do here. So what does James do? He goes out and gets his PMP, his Project Management Professional Certification. And then anytime anybody asks us about PMI practices on a tour, we'd say, let us show you our work authorization board and our work packages and our work breakdown structure and our scheduled performance index. And they're like, well, but no, this is Agile. This isn't PMI. It's like, no, actually, it's PMI to a T. Not even the PMI that reinvented itself with a PMI Agile certification. PMI, one of its core concepts and principles was something called progressive elaboration. Well, if those two words bolted together is the essence of Agile. That's what Agile's doing. It's progressively elaborating what the solution is as you learn. The way people have implemented the practices of PMI is what has destroyed most organizations. No, we need big 3-ring binders. We need committees and policies and meetings and forms to sign. It's like, if you go back and read the PMBOK, it doesn't say any of that. People go, well, where's your documentation? Like, let me show you the 10,000 story cards we got for this. Let me give you the principles behind which work gets done here and all that kind of stuff. That's why I love Gene Kim's books, which, by the way, if you've listened to that one, it's 14 hours worth of listening, which is probably the more typical book. So.
Is that the Accelerate you're talking about, or
Gene Kim, the Phoenix Project, and
the Unicorn Project?
I haven't listened to that one yet.
Oh, it's really good. I'm let you to do that one. It's more technical. It's on the developer side of the fence. Like the other one was more on the operation side, told from that point of view, and I really enjoy it. I think that I don't know. I think it's going to be the goal, like the goal was, back in the 80s and 90s. I think the Unicorn Project will be that type of book going forward in the
I'm sure
2020. So
yeah, my blood pressure goes up as I listen to the Phoenix Project. Like, I've lived that life. I'm that guy, and I had Brent on my team, and I needed to figure out how to get around that hero because he was in everything, and he was the only one who knew how to do stuff. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, Rich, it's been awesome having you. I know we're past our time box a little bit. Is there anything at this time you want to plug or promote on the podcast?
Well, typically what I will tell you is that I tell people if they're interested in what we talked about, come visit. Those are a little harder right now, but stay tuned. We're figuring out how to do virtual tours, and some of our classes will break up into smaller pieces and deliver that the way we'll adapt and that sort of thing. But I would say if people are interested in learning more about us, I've written 2 books on the subject. Joy Inc. came out in 2013, and Chief Joy Officer just came out at the end of 2018. And so if you want a deep dive, those are probably the best places to get them.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. This has been an awesome conversation. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Oh, this was fun for me too. I really enjoyed the conversation.